Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Saco Council meeting. We do have 4 items under a workshop before we start the official meeting. So the first item tonight in our workshop is a new meeting management software overview, and I believe we have Director Prescott.
Emily will be, yeah.
Okay, we have Andrew.
So Director Prescott should be up shortly. I'll get us started. Here, let me grab a screen sharing device. All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Dickinson, Digital Media Manager with the Communications Department. As I just said, Director Prescott from the Planning Department, who's been a great partner on this initiative, will be joining us shortly. What we're going to do tonight is quickly walk you through our new meeting management software, which I assume you have all interacted with here on the council side, but this is also to sort of inform the public about the changes that they're seeing on meeting materials on our website and the best ways to make use of the new system. So to start off, I'm going to take us through tonight's meeting materials, which do not have the full functionality of the system in place yet because the meeting is in action. But following the meeting, you'll see timestamps, minutes, things that we'll show you on some planning board agendas here as well. So we'll start by going to the City Council agenda page. For anyone at home watching that would like to know how to navigate to this from the home page, we'll walk you through that, going to the boards and committees page, clicking on the Mayor and City Council link, and getting down to the City Council agenda page here at the bottom. So our old format looked like this. You see meeting materials as links in each row of this chart. Our new system looks like this, and Emily, now that you're here, feel free to jump in at any time, but I'll keep walking you through it for now. You'll see the meetings populate here as they're created. So July 22nd, this system took effect on July 15th. This is the first council meeting where we're using the new system. You see calendar format here versus the list, which can be a little more difficult to search through. Going by year here as the archive fills and time goes on. Clicking into the meeting, you see a pop-up which, let me make sure my computer's muted quickly. Which incorporates all the materials together. So at the top you have the live stream of this meeting happening right now. You have the agenda materials with the packet links. One thing to point out with this system is that everything that existed in the old system is a feature of this new system. So if you prefer to just have a PDF of the packet rather than this interactive page here, you can use these links up top to get either a one-page agenda PDF or a packet PDF with all of the attachments exported. So if you like to have PDFs, you can still do that through that method. Moving on, each item has these attachments built in as hyperlinks, so you'll click in, for example, to this item that we're on now, and you jump to a PDF attachment with any relevant associated materials for the item. Going back to the window, you still have everything here. So if you're on a mobile device, it would just be opening a new tab. If you're on a laptop such as the one I'm on, it opens up in your main browser window, and you always have this box here ready for you to come back to. So as you can see, that goes through to all of the rest of the items with all the attachments. Are there any questions on this packet section from the council?
Anyone have any questions or comments for Andrew? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. So I really like the links to the attachments. So I think that's a really easy feature to maneuver through. So I appreciate that. And I'm assuming that as time goes on, the attention to making sure that all the relevant material, I'm sure you're doing a good job trying to make that happen now. But with any new system, it's likely there may be some short-term oversights and get those fixed moving forward for additional attachments. Is that true? Okay.
Absolutely. So as this is a new system, we'll be working out any kinks that arise. So we invite you counselors, anyone who's using the meeting materials, including you watching from home or in the room right now, to let us know if there's anything you'd like to see changed or that isn't working exactly how you might like it, and we'll see what we can do.
I appreciate that. I just think it's important. You folks are all working hard to make this happen, but we can't have perfection coming right out of the chute. So for the public, if you see some issues that you think could be improved upon, I would take Andrew's advice and get that into the department. Thank you.
So I had in the old format, if there were any additional documents that came through, we had the More section, the More tab. They weren't included in the actual packet. We had the secondary area to put them in. How will that be done now? Just included right into the packet, or will there still be a separate location?
Thank you for that question. If I can go ahead and do my screen here. So this is an example. This is the July 2nd Planning Board meeting packet. And I can go over it in a minute with you, but at the bottom, what we've been doing is adding additional information provided after the Planning Board packet was published. So this is essentially the More section, and then it builds it right into the agenda and packet for us.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nathan?
Just a comment. I mean, I appreciate, city staff trying to find, I guess, software that kind of co-locates everything. I, looked at it earlier, and I'm an old dog, so it's hard to teach me a new trick, but I think that if people put forth the efforts, they'll find it to be much more inviting, number one. I went to the planning board page, and I really liked how the meeting pops right up on that same page. You don't have to search for it. So just thank you for the efforts.
Thank you. And the one last thing I'll just mention is we can index sections now, so you can actually jump to sections of the video within the meeting. So Lisa in our office has been indexing the planning board meetings, and you can also write your minutes directly in this software, so you can put the timestamps right in the minutes as you move through them.
So just to make that very clear for everyone watching at home, if you click on those video icons that Emily was scrolling past, it jumps you to that point in the video.
And you now have the option of Facebook or the
Yes.
agenda.
So
Watch
as
the
we
meeting.
as we mentioned before, we're not taking anything away that already existed. Facebook and YouTube live streams for council will continue. YouTube live streams for planning board as well. But you have the option now to come to our website and watch the video there. We know that a lot of people aren't users of social media, so it's another platform for people to watch on.
I would just say I think that alone would be greatly appreciated by many members of the public, because that's one of the, I won't say complaints, but one of the comments that I quite often hear is that, particularly an older population, they don't have Facebook or Instagram. So.
And this will be carried through all boards and commissions, similar agenda styles?
Yes, we've rolled it out for most, if not all of the boards and committees that have meetings coming up this month. So if you navigate through that boards and committees page on the website, to each board and committee, you'll see a similar looking display box with the calendar and future meetings. One other point to make on that is that it does create consistency among all boards and committees of the city, so that when people interact with these meeting materials, they're knowing what to expect across the board.
Yeah, appreciate that. That was a goal we wanted to accomplish.
And then I do know that one other item that came up last year was tracking public comment from residents. We will be able to, if it's public comment presented during the meeting, provide it in the additional information, just so it's clear when it was presented. If it's public comment received ahead of when we release the meeting packet, we can just actually add a tab here, similar to how you see application materials. We can add a public comment tab as well and put that link directly in there, just like we are with the meeting packets, but it might stand out a little bit more than it is currently.
Is this going to adjust any changes to the way we get the minutes now? Or will the minutes still come the same way?
So I'm familiar with planning board minutes, so they will still come in the meeting packet as draft formats, and you'll be asked to review them and approve them as a draft.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Gunn?
Thank you. I just want to clarify in terms of public comment. So say we finish a meeting, we go home, and we go online to City of Saco website, and we look at the meeting. Now, would it have the same effect as if we went home and went on social media, that we would see our meeting, and then where public comment is, anybody who wanted to comment from home, it's almost like their own section of comments on our website, sort of like they would do on social media?
It would not include the social media comments directly. What it would include are those comments that people make at the meeting during the public comment. If they submit something in writing, we can add it to the more section.
I got you.
What will be the more section. And with planning board, as you're well aware, there's often a lot of public comment through public hearings, and so this will help us log it better electronically as well.
So everything on the officials, so anything else social media, that's a whole separate thing.
Yeah, that will remain on social media as it is today.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that being said, though, please bear with us tonight as we maneuver through if we can't find a page or... Okay, and item B tonight is contract zoning. So we will be receiving an update on our contract zones and some issues that we had planned out for last month as well. And we do have Director Prescott with us as well. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm pleased to be here today to give you an update on where we are at with contract zoning. I'll give you a little bit of a recap of where we've been with this. I know a lot of us have sat in some time and put in some effort, so I appreciate all the effort we've received so far. First off, though, I'd like to introduce our new team member, Demetria Pellegrino. She's our Assistant Planner of Compliance, so we're very happy to have her on board. I'll let her say a couple of words right now.
Good evening. My name is Demetria Pellegrino. I really enjoyed my first 2 months with the City of Saco. In addition to compliance reviews, I have been working on contract zoning as well. We're here to show you some great progress that we've made in contract zoning and go from there.
Great, thank you. Just a little bit of a recap. I also went back and listened to our February 12th workshop, and these were the major items, bulleted format that we had talked about at that time. Basically, a review of a contract zone requests as an initial preliminary review with council, a policy discussion on some guiding principles relevant to the contract zone process, a standard operating procedures for consistency on contract zones, compliance and enforcement tools and provisions. There were some questions on long-term effects of contract zones, including on our public schools. And then we had questions on termination and transfer of existing contract zones. So we will not get into every bullet this evening, but we will share a pretty big update we've had on process and get your feedback on that. And then just to set expectations, we will return to you with red lines. We are planning to do that. We have a timeline laid out in August. Some additional updates since the last meeting. You just heard from our new Assistant Planner of Compliance. We've created the first draft of our contract zone database. I do know there was some good work done with interns back in 2018, but the city had not kept it up since then. So we went back. We really enhanced it. We really dove into some of the contract zones that just wasn't done previously. We have a draft standard operating procedure that will be under legal review this week after we get your feedback on a process change. And we have updated previous Chapter 230, Article 17 ordinance amendment provisions, which includes how we do contract zoning and rezoning in the city. And like I said, as soon as we get your feedback from this evening, we will go back, update those red lines, and then we'll have a legal review of those, and they'll be back in front of you. I'm just going to ask Demetria to share a little bit of a data snapshot on what we've learned going through the contract zones and what they've been really issued for in the past.
So we're going to show a bit of a trend on the screen of what we see for the types of contract zones that have been established. You can see that the largest is housing and mixed use. And in the next bar graph over, you're going to see housing broken down, and a large portion of it going to elderly, disability, subdivision, and mixed use. Mixed use being retail, we'll have our larger developments in there as well. And then you'll see a large group to wireless communication, which is the towers. Eating establishments could be anything from ice cream to, I think there was an in-house, and then other would be something like a church. So it's a nice little breakdown. We have seen 51 contract zones from about 1994 to 2022.
When we give you the number 51, that considers amendments that have been made to original contract zones. So I know different numbers have been thrown out there, but.
I have a quick question on that before we, of those 51, are those current active contract zones? Have we gone through and expired or eliminated transfer of sales or anything like that? Is that an accurate number?
That's been vetted out pretty heavily, and so now what we're going to be doing is going through legal review on each individual contract zone, and we will be making our recommendations on those that we consider no longer active.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? It's a good data point to take away to understand how we've used these tools historically as a city. So some of the goals, and I think they're really shared goals from what I heard from our previous workshops, were to create a contract zone database, to make that database accessible online and easier to find, especially for potential future buyers. Bring clarity to the process for staff and for business and property owners, and then have a standard operating procedure for how we handle contract zones as staff. And so these are all things in the works, and I'll be happy to report back to you when we have the red lines in front of you. So knowing that those are the goals of this process and keeping those in mind as we move forward, we've done a good amount of research on how we could update our contract zone process based on the feedback that we received in February. I will go through this flow chart, but I do have to just share that this has been the process that is used in the town of Scarborough. The planning director there tells me she thinks it works very well for their needs. And I think this would fit in with a lot of what I heard from February 12th. So the way it would work, the way we're looking at it and recommending is we would have a request made to the planning department with a lot of the application details and background that we would normally be seeing. We would have the required paperwork submitted, the fees from Chapter 83 ordinance fee schedule. We would notice appropriate parties, and we would ask that the applicant put a sign on the property so that people were aware of the request. Would then do an initial staff review. It would be important to us to make sure that when we bring forward these red lines, it's clear that you need a tax collector sign-off to confirm that all the taxes are paid on the property, confirmation from all the departments that any outstanding fees or liens have been satisfied, and then initial comments provided from staff about the proposal. The next step from there is the biggest change to the process, which would be a recommendation to have a preliminary joint council and planning board review meeting. The council already has joint meetings with planning board, so we feel, and there's not that many contract zone requests, so we feel that this would be a very good recommendation to get the ideas and thoughts on the process, not only from a land use policy perspective from the planning board side, but then from a legislative policy and comp plan perspective as well from the city council side. For this, we would actually go right into public hearing because we would want to make sure that we get all the feedback that we need from the public as well. We would notice the public hearing according to state standards. We would have a guiding principles policy review to help set the discussion and let everyone know what you're looking at a potential contract zone against. And then at that meeting, The planning board and the city council would both be able to offer questions, but it would be the city council's ultimate decision to give preliminary feedback to the requester. Either continue or amend the request, or maybe there's no interest in the request, in which case you go back to home and start again. Assuming that's a successful joint planning board meeting, and you could have multiple meetings, you don't have to be done in one night with your business, then the applicant, the requester, would move on to a preliminary planning board development review process that would be specific to contract zones. So we would still require a site plan review process, just like we are under Chapter 179 provisions. We would have any other applicable development review process in the mix as well, just like we do now. And then there would be a recommendation from the planning board as well, so they'd finish their preliminary work and then give a recommendation back to council on any contract zone provisions that should be considered before final agreement. And then there would be, if it's successful, there'd be a condition on preliminary that council action has to be finalized on the agreement, and you'd go back to just the city council this time as a requester and get action on the contract zone agreement. The council at that meeting would be asked to provide their findings and conclusions, as well as consistency with contract zone requirements. We are also building out a template, so every contract zone will be required to use the same template. You could certainly modify it for certain projects, but everyone would be starting off the same way, which is a huge concern on how to monitor all these for compliance with different provisions. As you move forward, assuming the final action from council is approved or successful, the next step would be to execute the agreement. I will tell you right now, we do not have every contract zone agreement as a signed version. We aren't missing a lot, but we have a couple we're still trying to track down. So knowing that an executed agreement would have to be built into the process and is in the ordinance would be very important to us to make sure we're following up on the council action appropriately. With that, we'd also require a notice on the registry to alert future buyers. The final agreement would have to be on file with the city clerk, as well as a copy in other departments such as planning, assessing, and any other relevant code enforcement, any other relevant departments. Then the next step would be you do your final development review with the final contract zone with the planning board, almost like a similar or akin to a final subdivision review process. And they would complete their final action for the development review, and then you can start your development. We would post that new contract online, and then we would provide periodic updates on monitoring and compliance. So this is our thought on process updates. I'll go back to the original slide. It's a lot. You can always give me comments to city administration later, too.
And councilors, remember, we are in workshop, so you do not need to be recognized to speak. Just don't talk over each other, and the questions are open and free to move forward.
Thank you. A lot to take in, I'll say that. But again, I want to thank you for the effort here. As many know, I've personally felt like I've been spinning my wheels or standing at attention for the better part of at least 7 years on this particular topic. It's really no fault of any one individual. It was really finding the right people to figure out how to act. And I think, you clearly have spelled out a process, which is the issue I had with the prior process. It really wasn't a process, in my opinion. So, like I said, still a lot to take in. Conceptually, I like it a lot. And again, kudos to you and staff for hearing our voices at prior meetings, because oftentimes I've left them going, so what did we really say? So, clearly you were able to capture a lot of what, my own concerns were. I know Councilor Hatch's concerns. So I look forward to, digging deeper into it and moving it forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in with similar sentiments as I see the flow here. I know I've been pretty much a pain on this whole topic. I want to acknowledge, I sent some update information to council, some of the stuff that I had put together in the past. And I'm really encouraged because I see a lot of the themes that were of concern to myself and other counselors working their way into this process. So beautiful, keep going. I also had submitted a significant amount of sort of redlining suggestions to the ordinance itself, but I think we need to wait on that so we can give you an opportunity to come forward and share with us what your thoughts are. I'm also recognizing that my document probably needs a little separation between ordinance change and process. So I'm good with that, okay? I'm really good with that. So I tell you to just keep going full speed ahead here, and I look forward to the continued discussion. Just a couple of specific points. When we get to the prior to the preliminary review, do you think there's any necessity for a neighborhood meeting, that informal process that we currently have for other projects? I think is fabulous. I think it gives the neighbors an opportunity to get a sense of what's going on and maybe give some input that could eventually end up in our lap on that third step as we talk about it. So I just throw that out there for some consideration. Other than that, I'm really happy to see some of this stuff in there. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the ride and see if we can get through this without a lot of heavy debate, heavy lifting. So I appreciate the respect you gave to that document that I've been bantering around for 2 years.
Thank you. We also did receive public comment from others, so we've incorporated everything, and you'll get that along with the red lines when we move forward.
I just had a question on the guiding principles. Going back to our original conversation, is that going to be consistent with, I think we had thrown out like having a set of standards that we basically rate? And then if
Yes.
there's exceptions, putting that to help with the determination of moving something forward or not? Is that kind of what that guiding principle would be following under the joint council and planning board review?
Exactly. So these are the recommended guiding principles we have thus far, based on listening to the conversation that took place in February. Certainly, they can be altered as we move forward. What we did was we took the 3 or 4 that currently exist. They're worded slightly different, but they're similar to what you asked planning board to make a recommendation upon. So unusual nature or location, comprehensive plan consistency, existing zoning. We've added significant public benefit. You'll also see that there's a requirement to include a significant public benefit in the red lines that we'll be bringing forward. And then monitorable and enforceable conditions, which is going to be really important for staff and compliance with ordinances overall.
Any other questions or comments at this time?
I just had one other comment. We received a communication from a citizen, Michael Dahlem, and forgive me if I mispronounce your last name, about issues relative to the new zoning ordinance, and we don't need to vet that here, but I'm assuming that's in the mix as well, and that
It is, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
And we'll bring, like I said, we'll bring back all those public comments that we have logged, and bring them forward with the red lines, even though they'll be about the previous red lines. At least you'll have them in one spot. I would like to pause here and just, we'll share with you a paper version of what Dimitri has been working on top of monitoring site plans and subdivisions with the code office. And again, we'll have this more readily available. We still have some vetting on it, but that's your contract zone list in paper form. And we'll bring a version of that back for the August meeting.
You might want to submit that as a version of the state flag, you know, to see if we
Anyone else? Okay.
And just our next steps, we have to do legal review of contract zones. The zone database, we have a go-live target date of September 16th, and we'll be back for new business. I think it's important we do one more new business reading to make sure we've captured the comments before we go into first reading. And we've also created an email, thanks to the help with IT, where you can submit compliance questions specifically, so we don't clutter the planning box, and they go directly to Demetria and me. So just so you're aware if you talk to residents.
And Dimitri, welcome aboard. I've heard nothing but wonderful things about you, so I'm glad we got a chance to meet you this evening, and keep up that good work for us. We appreciate that.
Thank you, that's good news.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that completes item B on the workshop list. That now takes us down to item C, and that is a presentation on tax increment financing districts, the TIF.
Thank you, Your Honor. The reason for this is twofold. One, to bring the new council members up to speed on tax increment financing, and the other is to give a refresher for those that have been working on the council under these agreements, and so that if there are any questions that you might have relative to this, anybody, the new council members or any council member, feel free after the presentation, because it's important that you understand how this works. It's an integral part of not only our land use, but also our financing and our budget.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Tracy Desjardins, Director of Economic Development, and I have Bill Socia, who is with the Bernstein and Shore and has a lot of experience in working with municipalities on TIFs. This is a kind of a good one-on-one that we should go through, especially when we do have new councilors, just as the city administrator had stated. It gives you the opportunity to see on the legal side if you have questions, and also we're going to touch base a little bit on even what Saco has for its TIFs. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Phil.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I work I'm a municipal lawyer, but I work on TIF districts, and our firm has helped the city on a number of districts. My former colleague, who's no longer with the firm, did a lot of that work, but I've continued that. So this is a pretty high level and basic overview, just to give kind of the 101. If you have any questions, I'm happy to be interrupted. So that can go there.
I got your agenda.
We're just going to cover these 4 topics today. So what is a TIF district and how do they work, and the benefits in the process. Types of TIF districts, how can TIF revenues be spent, and then a slide on the city's existing TIFs, just so everyone understands what we have today. So what is a TIF district? Well, it's tax increment financing, and it's authorized by the legislature for municipalities as an economic development tool. We sometimes say it's one of the few economic development tools really municipalities have. It allows you essentially to designate a boundary around an area. It does not have to be contiguous for the purposes of economic development. It captures the original assessed value in that area. I'm going to have a couple more slides on that process. Essentially freezes in time the value in that area, and then allows you to capture the taxes on the increase in the assessed value as that development goes forward. And then you can use those revenues, which we'll then call TIF revenues, for particular purposes that are authorized by the statute. I just want to read briefly the sort of authorization language, because it's sort of helpful for people to understand what the purpose of TIF districts are for. The legislature has said it's to provide impetus for industrial, commercial, transit-oriented, or arts district development, or any combination, to increase employment, and to provide for facilities outlined in the development program, in other words, for certain costs you can spend your funds on. There's another type of district, which I'm also going to talk about, affordable housing TIF district, and the legislative finding there says that there's a need for development of affordable, livable housing and the containment of the costs of unplanned growth in Maine municipalities. So those are the purposes of these two different types of TIF districts. The potential benefits of the TIF, a TIF district, is to assist in economic development goals of your comprehensive plan or other planning or visioning documents, attract new development, tax dollars, jobs, improve your local economy, accomplish significant infrastructure projects, and a tax shift benefit. Typically what you'll see in the credit enhancement agreement side is that developers will sometimes ask for this to help make their projects financially viable. And so there's a decision the city goes through on whether that's the kind of development you want, and if that TIF district will help bring the kind of jobs and development to your city. I kind of briefly talked about this, but this is a slide I like to use to kind of explain how this value is sheltered. So if you think about it in time, if you adopt a TIF district today, and you have a $1 million valuation on that piece of property, that's frozen in time, and taxes, you'll continue to pay taxes on that, or the developers will, I should say, the owners, and they'll go to your general fund. But then you capture any increase in that assessed value as a result of development. So in this hypo, it's $5 million investment, so the assessed value of that property is $6 million, but it's divided up in a way where the taxes on the original assessed value will go to your general fund, the taxes on the new value, TIF revenues, will go to your TIF fund that can be spent only for designated purposes. At the end of the life of the TIF, the taxable value becomes 1 again. And so in this case, after 30 years, it'll be a $6 million tax project. There are caps, there are limitations on these districts. At least 25% of the area needs to be blighted, need of rehabilitation, redevelopment or conservation, or suitable for commercial or arts district uses. We typically see that the city will say that it's suitable for commercial or arts district uses. That's the typical area. But there's also acreage caps of no more than 2% of a single district and 5% of your total town's acreage. There are exclusions, so downtown TIFs, transit-oriented TIFs, and community wind power TIFs are actually excluded from that category. There's also a valuation cap. You can't have more than 5% of your total municipal valuation in a TIF district. And again, there's some exclusions that I just noted, as well as certain single high taxpayer, high valuation districts. There's a limit of 30 years. However, the legislature just this past session passed for the first time an ability to go beyond 30 years. So you can now have a district go for 50 years, an additional 20 years, if and only if your final 20 years is limited to 75% of your TIF revenue for affordable housing projects or transit-oriented development. So as part of the legislature's number of different kind of legislation they've enacted to incentivize affordable housing. So that's the first time you've been able to go past 30 years, but it's limited in how you can use the funds. So what's the benefit to the municipality? It can be fairly significant. So we call it the tax shift benefit. And when you're applying for a TIF district, you have to actually include a calculation that shows what the tax shift benefit will be to the community. What that means is there are, when you shelter that additional money, so we said $5 million of increased assessed value, that increase in value of that property because of the new development is sheltered from the state seeing it as part of your valuation. So it's as if it doesn't exist for purposes of your state valuation. That has certain benefits to you because the state valuation impacts three levers are triggered. If your valuation as a city goes up, your education subsidy goes down. If it goes up, your county taxes go up. It's basically a proportion of your municipal valuation. And then finally, if your municipal valuation goes up, your state revenue sharing goes down. Again, the more you go up, the less you get from the state. This is just a little description on what that means. And so I sort of already went over this, but I wanted this in the slides so people can understand how these sort of levers are enacted. And what it results in is I like to show this slide because essentially, for every new dollar you get from that increased assessed value, without a TIF district, you will lose some of that because of those shifts. So in other words, if you got another $4 million in for that development on the slide I showed you before, you did not TIF it. In the city of Saco's case, you would lose roughly 51% of it. That's dated, that's old data, but that's the last time we ran it for the city, which was 2021. So we have not updated those numbers. That was the last time you enacted the TIF district. That was the transit-oriented district. So I just pulled that. We did not run numbers again. But when you applied for that district, it was a 51% tax shift benefit, which is fairly significant, right?
Not the
So
same.
there's the benefit. This is a brief slide on process. The law requires essentially two different things: a public hearing and a vote of the legislative body. Those are really the only two parts of the process. But there's a lot that goes into that. There's negotiations with the developer that typically is proposed by a developer, but not always. So there's negotiations, and the staff are involved, your economic development office, and it'll come forward. And part of the analysis is this a benefit to the city? I do work with some municipalities. There's a very small tax shift benefit, quite frankly. They may already be a low receiver of certain aid, and it may not affect them as much. So part of what you want to see is, what kind of benefit do we get for the city by TIFing this area? And then once you have that information, then you can decide how you want to use those funds. I mentioned this at the beginning. There's two types of TIF districts. What we call the economic development TIF. That's reviewed by the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development after it's been approved by the council. And then there's an affordable housing TIF, which is reviewed by the Maine State Housing Authority, or Maine Housing, upon review. So economic development TIFs, I've talked about the general kind, but then there's three other kind of specific kinds of TIFs. There's a downtown district TIF, which is used to redevelop and revitalize downtown areas, and they aim to generate increased business activity and spur economic growth in the district. They're exempt from acreage and value caps. And there's an additional document required, it's called the Downtown Redevelopment Plan, essentially a planning document. A transit-oriented TIF, which the city has, that was enacted in 2009. It sort of recognized that transit and economic development are intrinsically linked. They're usually primarily used to fund projects related to roads, interchanges, infrastructure-related roads, train and bus stations, and obviously transit generally. They're also exempt from acreage and value caps. And finally, an omnibus district. That's really a term of art that doesn't appear anywhere in the statute, but what it means is essentially you can have a TIF district that you can have multiple credit enhancement agreements with like multiple developers. You just have to get it approved that way on the outset. And then you can do that, and essentially giving yourself authority to negotiate in the future. You see that a lot with business parks and things like that, where there's multiple parcels and things like that. I have a number of slides on affordable housing districts. I'm actually not going to go through all of them. Depending on the city, you have an interest or not. But I wanted to just mention it. I'm in this sort of busy period for affordable housing TIFs right now, because what happens is you have Maine Housing has their low-income tax credit program. There's a deadline to apply by September this year, sometime in September. And so we see a flurry of activity from our municipal clients where developers come to to ask for a credit enhancement agreement through a TIF. It allows you, it's in essence almost required by Maine Housing, because it's a point system. In one of the points, you can get points based on the type of credit enhancement you get with the city or municipality. So it's a way that Maine Housing helps analyze and score those applications. So you'll sometimes see those requests come in. And obviously it's intended to incentivize and help subsidize in some ways the development. Affordable housing is defined a certain way by Maine Housing as a household whose income does not exceed 120% of the median income for the areas. A lot of times I see sometimes these projects are for much lower income levels, but that's the limit. It can be used for senior housing and workforce housing as well. It's important to note that the original assessed value, that 5% cap I noted, that you can't have more than 5% of your original assessed value in the city. They're exempted from that cap, but they have their own 5% cap. So in other words, it's above and beyond the economic development 5% cap. It's the same process as I noted. Developers will typically ask for this because they're going through the Maine Housing's low-income housing tax credit program. And credit enhancement agreements really do go hand in hand with these types of TIFs, unlike you don't always have a credit enhancement agreement on the economic development side. So how can you spend your revenues, your TIF revenues, well, they have to be authorized, they have to fall within one of the authorized project costs that are in the statute. And there's 3 tiers, as I show in the slide. The first tier are projects that are within the district, specifically within the district, and those are typically capital costs and financing costs related to the district itself. So roads, think about that. Think about administrative services, administrative costs for employees are in this category. Project costs that are outside the TIF district but directly related to or made necessary by the district, that's tier 2. And again, those are projects that you are often have to spend proportionally. So if there's a proportion of a infrastructure project, for example, that's made necessary by a development that's outside of a TIF district, you can spend the funds for those purposes. And then there are tier 3 projects, which are citywide. So they're not necessarily made necessary by the district, but the legislature has authorized you to use that. And in that category, you see things like skills and job training programs, environmental improvement projects, certain recreational trails to promote economic development, transit services, fisheries and wildlife projects, quality childcare costs. There's a whole sort of costs that are in there. The key is you have to, when you draft and approve your TIF district, you have to include those categories in your TIF program or you can't spend them. So if you find projects in the future that you want to spend, we also get asked to help with amendments. So you can always amend your TIF in the future. And we do that quite often when a city decides, you know what, there are some project costs that we'd like, we're not in there, so we're going to amend it to add authorizations to spend additional funds. You can also, and this is what a lot of people think of when they think of a TIF, but it's obviously not the only thing, is a credit enhancement agreement. That's one of the costs you can use to spend it. And what that is an agreement or a contract with a developer where you are, in essence, reimbursing part of the taxes paid on the increased assessed value. So not the part that you froze in time, that continues to get paid normally, it's the increase. So the idea is, but for the development, you may not have that increased assessed value. But for that development, you may not get the tax shifts associated with adopting a TIF district, and so you're going to incentivize the development to go forward. It may not happen, and it's part of typically the financing stack for that developer to make the project viable. And you have a lot of flexibility with credit enhancement agreements as well. So it's not, it can be anywhere for 100% of those tax revenues to 10% or anything in between. And they can be staggered over time or decreasing over time. It can be for the full 20 years or it can be for just a portion of that district. So there's a lot of flexibility, and that's sort of part of that's one of the negotiations that goes on as part of this. Just a brief slide on, similarly, affordable housing TIF project costs are somewhat similar, but there are some differences. One of the differences is the costs of facilities used for recreational purposes. You can't pay for recreational services on the DCD side, but you can pay for recreational services like gyms and things like that, swimming pools on the affordable housing side. You can also use, another difference is that you can use affordable housing costs for mitigation that the district has in the municipality, including on the school system. So you can use those funds as part of your local contribution for schools. You cannot use economic development TIF revenue for that same purpose. Right. So that's one of the other differences. I'd say one of the other differences is on the housing side is on, you cannot on an economic development TIF and give back to a developer's funds for owned units. That's, DEC does not see that as economic development. They do qualify rental units, however, as economic development because it's more of a commercial activity. So you'll see apartments and things like that qualify under DCD, but not owned units. You can have either owned or rental units under the affordable housing TIF. Another project cost that I see a lot of municipalities interested in these days, particularly, are housing development revolving loan fund and investment funds. These are revolving loan funds, obviously, for on the affordable housing side, so you can use them for future projects for other people outside the credit enhancement idea. And then investment funds for the city to invest its own funds and to purchase property for these purposes. I've mentioned credit enhancement agreements already. I've sort of already gone over them, but this is just a slide I could sort of talk about. There's about 400 roughly. This was roughly active districts. In the last count we did, there was about 59% of those districts include at least one credit enhancement agreement. This was a slide just to pull together your existing TIFs. And you'll see that of your TIFs, you have credit enhancement agreements with all but two. You had one with the first one that expired. That was a 5-year credit enhancement agreement. So you had that expired, but you're continuing to TIF that area, the Industrial Park Road. It's an omnibus district, so that means you have the authority to enter into credit enhancement agreements in the future without going back to DCD for further approval. So I just thought this would be an interesting snapshot for you to have. Municipalities can adopt guidelines and application process. The city of Saco does have one. Not every community has one. We think it's a good idea to have one, similar to any process. So you have a process. You have something to think about, and you have an application process. So you have one, and I know that yours has been looked at by some other communities because not every community has one. Finally, I was asked just to kind of highlight a couple different things that the legislature has done over the last few years. Every session, it seems like there are different project costs that are added to the statute. These are the few over the last 2 or 3 years. Broadband and fiber optics expansion projects are now allowed. There are some limitations to that project cost. Interestingly enough, affordable housing and housing programs to assist those who are experiencing homelessness is now a project cost on the DECD side. So some communities, for various reasons, may choose, even if it's an affordable housing project, they may choose to use the DECD TIF versus the affordable housing TIF. There are benefits and pros and cons to each, but that's now a cost under the DECD side. Services for those experiencing homelessness is a newer category, but that's been added. Central administrative offices. This is something towns were trying to get forever, and DC said no money on town halls. You can now spend money on town halls. But they will only call it central administrative offices. They will not use the term town hall. Because for some reason there was just an idea at that state office that was not economic development. There's been a realization that it sort of is. There's a lot of activity goes on. We're already kind of paying for some of our staff out of TIF funds. So there are some limits. It's up to 50% of the capital costs and not to exceed 15% of the entire captured value, which could be high. And again, I already mentioned this 20-year extension that you can do up to 50 years if it's limited to affordable housing costs. So that is my high-level overview. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah.
Go ahead, questions or comments?
Question? I'll spare everybody my criticisms of Maine state law for another evening, I guess. But I just, for clarity purposes, I think what you just said was that previously, affordable housing TIFs, we had to have a separate TIF in order to apply that, but we
Right.
could now utilize, say, downtown development district TIF funds for affordable housing.
Yeah, as long as you have the affordable housing project costs, it's one of your allowed project costs in the TIF district.
Okay.
So if you don't, you can add them through an amendment in the future, but you have to have that on your list of approved project costs.
Yep.
And again, there are pros and cons. I'm working with, typically they are affordable housing TIFs, but not always. I'm currently working on one that DCD is involved in. It just sometimes involves two agencies. So, because even though DCD is the one reviewing it and approving it, ultimately it's for the purpose of the main housing program. So I find sometimes there's a little bit of crossover in terms of just the administrative review process.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
First, you mentioned the affordable housing is 120% of the housing cost.
Right.
What metric do you use to get that value?
So it's based on the HUD standard, and it's a main housing requirement. It's directly for main housing. So they'll look at the median. They'll look at the median. I don't have the statute right in front of me, but it's the median income of the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next question, because these are for certain amounts of time and looking at the dates, do we generally stagger these so that they don't all end at the same time and there isn't a negative impact on the city?
It's a good question. I'd say typically no, because TIF districts are typically reviewed and when there's a development opportunity that's come forward. So it's typically, but not always, it's in response to a development that's coming to your city,
Okay.
right? So which could come at any time. And so they're dealt with on a case-by-case basis typically. Every once in a while, you will see a sort of prospective TIF district where you've got a business park or something like that, where you want to create a mechanism to incentivize development to come into, so you can think about it without the pressures of a specific development at that moment.
Phil,
Yeah.
kind of touch base a little bit, because some of these TIFs are going to retire about the
Yeah.
same time, and what that type of impact would do, and I think that that's where council is coming from.
Sure, yeah, there is an impact, obviously, because once a TIF district expires, the entire value of that property will now show up as part of your municipal valuation, right? So you'll have that come on, and so that will have an effect on those state subsidies and county tax.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Attorney Saucia, it's always good to see you.
Good to see you too, Councilor Hatch.
So based on this last conversation, it would behoove us, I would think, to kind of plot out a plan of maintaining some level of TIF-related financing to sort of mitigate that risk of all of a sudden having our valuation shoot through the roof. Mine is more of a high-level question, based on your activity with TIFs statewide and given the pressures that all municipalities are facing relative to affordable housing. Have you found a spike in activity from municipalities to gain TIFs for affordable housing, or are we still kind of waiting for that to happen?
I haven't really done an analysis of the number of applications over the last few years, but I can tell you it feels pretty busy, just from an anecdotal perspective. And it really depends on the municipality. There's some municipalities that are not particularly interested, or there's just not a developer interested in that municipality. There are other towns that I work with that have a lot going on all the time in that area. So a little bit has to do with the desire and need of that community for affordable housing. But I do think there are developers out there who are actively applying. I know that the application process at Maine Housing is competitive. So there are more developers than that typically will get the affordable housing credits.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else?
Do we get a certificate of completion in the mail for TIF 101?
You don't need one for this, but I'm happy to draft one up for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay, that now takes us to the final workshop item, that is item D tonight, which is the Comprehensive Beach Management Plan, the proposed scope and the discussion. And with that, we have Director Fox with us tonight.
Good evening. Busy workshop night with all kinds of fascinating topics. So I'm just going to introduce and then turn it over to Rob Adams from Tie and Bond. Tie and Bond is one of our general engineering contracts that we have for several 3 to 5 year terms. And what came about is after this winter in particular, but I would say this is long overdue, the need for it is just to evaluate doing a comprehensive beach management plan. And I say comprehensive because beach management plan in the past just kind of meant a piping plover plan or how to take care of endangered species on our beaches. We want to go much further and look at a comprehensive document. I mean, we're fortunate that we've had a lot of state regulators that have dealt with Camp Ellis for 20 years, but some of them are retiring. We have staff that have dealt with Camp Ellis for 20 years, and there's a lot of institutional knowledge that we just need to land in a plan. We need to have it incorporate all of the everything that we're going to have to do as a result of the Army Corps $50 million offshore project, because we're going to have a lot of ongoing costs and responsibilities after that. And how do we, at least every week, I would say this year, a member of my department staff is meeting with residents and trying to figure out what do we do with the dune system, where's our bang for the buck to try to not eliminate, but at least prevent the effects of as much coastal erosion as we can. So I think the high-level benefits of creating a single document and working through this process is going to be clear roles and responsibilities for public versus private compliance with regulations and benefits to both sets of property, more tools in the toolbox to go to quickly and in response to storms, and ways to leverage funding more quickly, whether that be federal disaster funds or climate grants and whatnot. So this has been on the back burner, simmering to get in front of you for the last couple months. So Rob's going to walk through a presentation of what we would like to bring forward to you in August for a budget amendment. So this is not a funded plan right now, but we want to talk through, get your feedback, and then we'll come back with a cost estimate and work through the process if that's where it goes.
Great.
So go ahead, Rob.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll stand. My 2 teenage boys are taller than I am now, so I'm feeling vulnerable on my height. So I'll try to be brief, but also engaging, plenty of opportunity for questions and answers. I think, just as a background, Rob Adams, I'm a principal landscape architect, urban designer. We are a urban design studio within our larger organization of Time Bond, and you'll see that on some of the slides. But tonight we're going to talk about the team, who we are, what skill sets we bring, what the process we see this being, and some kind of the key catalyst or plan kind of commentary. I don't have the answers tonight, but I think this is as Pat said, a very important process. We've been involved in many of these kind of master plan implementation plans. We'll also talk about what this plan is not. So on this slide you can see obviously the kind of standard org chart, but City of Saco as being the primary client, relying on some of your out-of-house legal and real estate consultants. But really, myself and Dan Bison, who is actively involved with a lot of your water and wastewater facilities, who's very familiar with the town, will be the prime. And then the theme of this presentation and the project will be a deep bench. We have a portfolio of people much smarter than I am on some very technical components around both coastline, ecology, gray and green solutions, zoning, not zoning, regulatory bodies, funding opportunities, everything you could question, we have a resource to respond to. And Pat, if you go to the next slide, you can see as landscape architects, I think one of the things, and urban designers, one of the things we pride ourselves on is not only do we know how to kind of conceptualize and think the big picture, but a lot of our projects get built and have existed within New England for many decades. And so a lot of our history is around the Boston area, but we've been doing a lot of work up and down the seaboard. And in the last 10 years, 15 years, when no one was talking about resiliency or sea level rise, we were working on the waterfront and always kind of pushing the question. And so we've been pioneering a lot of the work that's been happening around mitigation. And you'll hear the term kind of both and a lot from us, that no longer are we talking about single source or single purpose infrastructure, but all of our projects need to kind of solve many problems. And so this both and concept is something you'll hear a lot. So, and then on the next slide, again, Time Bond, not only from a skill set point of view, but also a regional point of view. There's a lot of lessons learned down on the Cape. There's a lot of lessons we actually learned inland. I spent the last week in Vermont looking at a lot of the stormwater damage up there. It's pretty remarkable. And so there's a lot of kind of information we gain from a lot of our resources within our organization. And then on the next, I think one of the best assets we have about the team we've put forward together, Woods Hole Group, if anybody knows Woods Hole Group, again, people way smarter than I am. Kirk Bosma is a good friend of mine, and we've been working together. They will be doing they've done a lot of the modeling for Saco. We will rely on that, and they'll also be helping us with the forecasting around the Army Corps work and what kind of impacts we might see that. And then Pete from the State of Maine Geology Department, very familiar with the area, and we'll rely on him to help us just think kind of a little bit big picture about where things are looking to go if we all like disappeared, what the landscape might do to us. And then on the next slide, just real quickly, I think Pat talked about what the objectives were. The process is pretty straightforward. We're not going to spend a lot of time on inventory or analysis. I think part of the process, or part of the goal here is, one, to catalog all the reports, analyses, all the documentation that's occurred to date and get it into one source. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. What this project is not another analysis plan. It'll be an action plan. The next step will be starting to identify opportunities, constraints. What things are we looking to preserve? What things are we looking to enhance? And conversely to that, what things are really putting pressure on us? Access, obviously erosion, future sea level rise. What are all these levers that we're looking to either uphold or to flip in the opposite direction? And then we'll put forth a lot of design and implementation ideas, both short-term and long-term, both pre-Army Corps and post-Army Corps, both private and public. And so you'll get a lot of ideas around what the possible solutions can be. This project is not going to provide you a set of construction documents that you can go out and build something tomorrow, but it'll identify phased solutions that are very implementable, not only from a cost point of view, from a funding point of view, but also from a regulatory point of view. And then a lot of consultants, a lot of us talk about engagement. I think we drink the Kool-Aid very strongly. A project that has a grassroots support, has input from the community, is baked by people who know and love and use the area, is a much stronger plan at the end of the day. Most of our open spaces and public realm that have community input fare much better, both from a use and but also a maintenance and a longevity point of view. That goes the same with our infrastructure projects. So there will be outreach that occurs as part of this project. We like to kind of call it the gather and share, right? The first kind of outreach is getting ideas, hearing what the concerns are. The second is sharing what those solutions are, reflecting the fact that we've taken into account what the community has to say. And then lastly, we'll give you a document, right? One, it's a collection, a warehouse of all the studies done to date, a collection of our ideas, a matrix around regulatory agencies, what their no-fly zones are, ideas around and documentation of what different funding sources are. And so it'll really be a playbook for you guys to move forward around the shoreline. So on the next couple slides, Pat. So there's clearly some things that are kind of causing this other than just climate change in the news recently. But so the Army Corps, for those, I assume we all know, we're not here to, this project won't debate the merits of the Army Corps solution. It's merely to talk about what one can expect from a sediment and from an erosion and from a kind of change point of view, and also how the city can expect to maintain these improvements, right? What new paradigm is there associated with these improvements? And then next, on the next slide, you can see clearly Camp Ellis is a kind of pressure point for all of the kind of activities around erosion, climate change, the kind of tension between private static land ownership and the ever-changing coastline. And so that's clearly one of the focus areas. And I think on the last slide, just also being cognizant, there's other solutions or other problems or opportunities and constraints other than Camp Ellis, right? There's really three typologies that you have along your coastline. One is private property abutting the coast. One is in the middle where there's some opportunities around public right-of-way. There's a roadway that separates some of the land, private homes from the coastline. And then there's the Camp Ellis where everything's essentially right up front. And so our solutions won't just be focused on Camp Ellis. They won't just be focused on one of the zones, but we'll have solutions to put forward for all the zones. And again, this idea of kind of short-term and long-term solutions. So it's a project we're very excited about, and it's a project that is obviously kind of in the forefront of everybody's mind. I think, as I said, all the solutions that we'll put forth or ideas that we put forth will have baked in this notion of public-private opportunities, right? There's solutions that not only the city can benefit from, not only the city kind of embarks upon, but there's ways for the public and the private to work together to form opportunities to work under a joint master plan towards a complete vision. So that's really all we have tonight. Happy to answer any questions now or later. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I personally can say that we're very excited about this as well.
Yep.
Unfortunately, Councilor Berman, who is the shoreline counselor for Ward 4, was not able to attend, but he was looking forward to it. He was going to watch the meeting and then looking forward to any meetings coming up. Anyone else with questions or comments? Nope. Okay.
Great.
I guess
Thank you.
So attached, just to wrap up this item, so attached to the item commentary was a scope of services. And we've already tentatively gone back and forth, several Zoom meetings with the team, as they are spread out around New England, some of them, and collaborated on sort of what is the level of effort and costs for each of these. So, but I didn't want to arrive at any final cost to bring you until we got some feedback tonight. But I think we've got a pretty good handle on what the area needs. They put in a great deal of time, learning a lot about and asking a lot of good questions about our frontage and what it kind of consists of. And we have the advantage of they've been working on the resiliency efforts in the Saco River for the treatment plant. And they also sort of did a spur of the moment peer assessment for the damages caused by the winter storms so that we'd be FEMA eligible for repairs and maintenance. So I think we're on a good path, but I will obviously be available throughout the budget amendment process to answer any further questions, but we'll get that to you probably starting August 5th.
Yeah, going through the scope, it looks like a lot of the important items have been covered. Happy to see that list.
Doing this through our general engineering contract also allows us to be adaptive as we go. If we get partway through a phase of this project, we can tailor the rest of the scope and change as we go if we need to.
It's clearly a shift from being reactive to proactive, and I think in a long-term scope of things, that's always the most cost-effective way to go, is to be prepared, be funded, have a plan, and implement it when it's needed. So I am also excited about this as well. I think it's a good opportunity for us to get into a proactive mindset. So.
And I know there are some residents that may even speak during public comment tonight, but just rest assured to everyone that's affected down there, we will be not waiting until this plan is 100% complete to implement low-hanging fruit items along our coastline ahead of this coming storm season.
Great, thank you. Okay, that concludes the workshop portion. It is 7:42. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, come back at 7:47, and we will start the regular meeting. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome back. We would like to officially start the Saco City Council meeting for July 22nd, 2024 at 7:47. Make note that all members of the council are present with the exception of Councilor Berman and Councilor Archer, who are both excused. And would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance this evening? Thank you. That now takes us to item 4, and that is any committee correspondence to council. Are there any committee correspondence? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. I've got a couple items if I can figure out where I put my notes. So traffic safety met last Thursday, and I guess there was, well, first I'd like to just comment on, we received a report from Director Fox, and while he admitted that it wasn't a scientific report when it comes to delineators, I guess we're calling them, that the city has put out for the bike lanes, it was, at least my own opinion, it was kind of disappointing to hear how often they've been struck. So I just would, again, put that out there for people to pay attention to them, and hopefully as we go forward, we'll make some improvements in that area, but at the same time, they're there to protect both the driver and the pedestrian. So I get it, it's an inconvenience, but again, having them hit as often as they have is concerning. And then the Traffic Safety Commission, or committee rather, did vote to well, first we made Green Street Extension. I don't know if it's technically called an extension, but I've always referred to it as such. The farther leg of Green Street that's in Ward 5, a one-way towards Spring Street. It's currently both ways. That was a request by the residents. Additionally, which this one's probably more of an impact to everybody in the city that drives in the downtown, we approved a 90-day trial period making Pleasant Street a one-way from Main Street to Elm Street starting in August for a 90-day period. This, of course, is in line with the parking study that we previously had commissioned, and it was a request from Economic Development, the neighborhood, and myself. So I think, again, I suggested the 90-day period because I think rightfully so, we all, committee level, had various concerns of how it would actually unfold. So the 90-day period gives us an opportunity to reassess at the end. But that is a big change. So I think it's important that people recognize that, and I'm sure that city staff communications will get that out there to everybody. I think that's it. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing anyone. Moving on to item 5 under general. We do have a Harbor Fest Day proclamation. Whereas Camp Ellis is a working waterfront that employs many local residents and attracts many tourists and locals who enjoy its beaches, water sports, charter boats for sailing and fishing, and the delicious food. Whereas over the years, the Camp Ellis beach has been significantly altered by erosion. Ongoing efforts are in place to bring back the beautiful beach that has been lost. And whereas the City of Saco will be hosting Harbor Fest, a locally grown community festival celebrating the working waterfront and the rebuilding efforts to bring the beach back. And whereas Harbor Fest will start on Saturday, August 3rd, with fireworks, followed by a full day of family-friendly activities on Sunday, including games for children, food trucks, crafters, and live music. And whereas community members are encouraged to participate in Harbor Fest, to reminisce about Camp Ellis' rich history, and to celebrate the bright future ahead for its businesses, residents, and visitors. Now, therefore, I, Jody L. McPhail, Mayor of Saco, do hereby proclaim August 4th, 2024 as Harbor Fest Day. signed this 22nd day of July, 2024, by the Mayor of Saco. Thank you. Okay, that now takes us to item 6, and that is public comment. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak, please step forward, state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak to council.
I'm David Plavin. I live at 36 Lower Beach Road in Saco. I am the Vice President of Save Our Shores Saco Bay and the Chairman of the Saco Shoreline Commission. I'm here to speak tonight not only in support of the beach management program, but also to stress how important it is. For the past 20 or 30 years, Saco has really put all its eggs in the Army Corps basket when it comes to fighting erosion. And while the Corps project is making some progress and will definitely help, there's more to be done. And there's a lot of things that have been happening elsewhere in other communities that I think you should be aware of, especially in Scarborough. Scarborough has a full-time resilience coordinator. She just helped the city get a waterfront resilience grant. Earlier this year, she helped get them a $1.4 million federal grant for restoration and resilience of Scarborough Marsh. She just announced a study this spring to assess Scarborough's vulnerability to sea level rise, storm surge, and other environmental threats. And Scarborough also has an annual dredge budget, and because of that, they're able to dredge the river every 5 to 7 years. We dredge our river every 20 years. Old Orchard Beach has an aggressive beach management plan too. Obviously that beach is their whole town, but it helps keep their beach pristine, clean. Biddeford recently passed a climate action plan, and they were also going to form a sustainability committee. I'm not standing up here telling you that Saco has not done things. I'm especially thankful to the city administrator with the One York County community that has made contributions to get the county dredge. We're also actively pursuing a dredge for this fall from that dredge, so that would be a very good thing. We're working on a climate action plan. We had a public meeting a few months back, and we're anxiously looking forward to seeing that. Let's see. A coastal engineer is going to be hired, hopefully, and that's going to be a huge help to us too. So we're making some steps. We still have a lot of catching up to do. I think the beach management plan is absolutely integral in anything that we do going forward. I think we've spent a lot of time filling in the same holes with sand, and those holes are either going to be inundated or we can come up with some ideas that will maybe make those holes go away, and we can move to a more pristine beach with new seawalls, living shorelines, dune restoration, et cetera, et cetera. We need all of that. We need the beach management plan, and I just hope you'll keep all that in mind when you bring it forward to council and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, good evening. My name is Inga Brown, and I live at 161 Simpson Road, and I'm here just to give some initial disorganized feedback on the contract zone discussion this evening. I'm really happy that this item is really getting a lot of attention and a lot of close work from staff, and I applaud them for that. Some initial reactions. I do believe there have been issues in the past with financial capacity related to contract zone applications. The applicant must document that they have the financial capacity to build and maintain the project. And I know there have been questions on some of vetting that out a bit more. Several of the contract zone agreements suffer from very vague language, very broad language, non-specific language. And as Emily laid out for you, one of her standards is that the project has to be monitorable and enforceable. And so when the contract zone itself, the agreement suffers from very vague language. And when it's brought to the city attorney's attention and they say, boy, yeah, that's really vague, that's really a shame, then I think we really need to look at how those contract zone agreements are actually written. I believe fees, applicants are, I think, going to be educated that there are going to be fees for compliance. I think that's a good step forward. I would like to bring forward the issue of format of the compliance reports. Those, in my view, have been an afterthought or created kind of haphazardly. If the format of the compliance report is not very meaningful, then the data collected also will not be very meaningful. The public good standard, I think that that is an important and common sense standard. But I also think it's subjective. I think that it's a very broad standard. I think the council is certainly capable of having a thoughtful conversation about what public good is. But I also want to remind you that sometimes the public good aspect becomes a commodity and it becomes leveraged in a way that there seems to be an untouchable aspect to the contract zone recipients, that somehow they are above the ordinance or can do as they please. And we have had plenty of documented cases here before the planning board of asking not permission, but just going ahead and doing whatever you want to do. So holding those applicants responsible and also making sure that they understand that they have received a very unique and a very special modification of the zoning ordinance. It's a very special thing. And when recipients say, oh, I didn't know that was in my contract zone agreement, it's really easy to hold people accountable. We do this all the time, probably in your lines of business. In my business as a teacher, we hold students accountable. You have to sign an academic honesty policy. You understand what is expected of you, and you understand what the consequences are. I don't think
Thank you, Inga.
too hard.
40 seconds over.
That does it. I'm at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Happy summer, everyone. It's Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street. First and foremost, I am grateful for this new administration for comprehensively addressing many stakeholders' grievances, including new meeting software transparency and its ease of use, as well as contract zoning. I commend the City Administrator, Mayor McPhail, City Planner, Assistant Planner of Compliance, Communications, and IT for your detailed work towards these two workshop presentations. I feel that we collectively have been heard and action towards good governance is happening. Thank you. I realize most of my concerns were addressed in the workshop. However, I will still present some of them to emphasize my concerns for the record. I also question how will documents, links, subsequent communications be provided in the new software prior to a meeting. The Planning Board July 2nd link and earlier comments that stated after the meeting. Please further clarify. As a layperson, I have critically reviewed 230-1705, Saco's 51 contract zones, and their conditions, and have the following questions and/or comments for your continued consideration. As many of us know, CZs are the amendments to the zoning ordinance, and also a contract that is personal to the parties. We also know some contract zones and their appeals have been a mess for all involved for several years. In the last several months, has the CC or city addressed Ward 4 stakeholder Mr. Dahlum's letters on record with an outside counsel prior to codifying any contract zones in the 230-1706 list? Will you codify any new owner having obligated to enter into a new contract with the city? Where are the codified provisions and well-written details for enforcement and remedies for breach of any condition or restriction listed? Where is the codified penalty clause and its details? Where is the uniformity and consistency of such language? Where is the codified language addressing and detailing the compliance monitoring of CZA provisions? Who will perform? Will the property owner pay for that monitoring annually? Where is the codified language whereupon the property owner may terminate a CCA as long as the restored use is compliant with current zoning on record? Housekeeping 1705C states City of Saco, but what department? I remain concerned that until stakeholders' pending grievances can be addressed about certain city officials until after certain pending appeal determination, I still believe the common denominator author in some contract zones and its appeals is biased and partial to the developer and not serving in the best interest of the city. There's no teeth to the contracts, no teeth in the CZ ordinance. Going forward, stakeholders deserve legal review with outside counsel or Phil Saucier for anything related to contract zones, be it its continued redlining or legal advice. Stakeholders deserve to be able to have trust, confidence, and faith in the process. We deserve new and fresh legal eyes as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, not seeing anyone. We will now move on to item 7, and that is the approval of the minutes. There now are no minutes to approve this evening. Item 8, consent items. We do have 2 items on the agenda this evening. Item A is the solid waste permit for AgriCycle, and item B is to confirm the mayor's reappointments to the Park and Rec Advisory Committee of Douglas Edwards, Caroline Ellis, Genevieve Johnson, and Angela Presby. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Motion made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hewitt. Any discussion on the items? Okay, roll call vote. Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion on the consent items passes 5-0. Okay, that now takes us to action items. And there, item A is 1 reading, minor correction to recently adopted Charter 106 Floodplain Management Ordinance revision. And that is Councilor Hewitt.
On May 20th, 2024, the City Council adopted revisions to the Chapter 106 Floodplain Management Ordinance to be compliant with federal requirements. Staff then reported to those revisions to the main floodplain management program. The state office provided feedback, requesting that 2 minor corrections be made as soon as possible. The first correction is to add the word "not," and the second correction is to add the word "national," both as indicated in the exhibits.
Read the motion.
Okay. Be it ordered that the City Council hereby ordains in minor edits to add the word "not" and the word "national" to the Chapter 106 Floodplain Management Ordinance as indicated in the attached documentation.
Motion has been made by Councilor Hewitt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. So while I certainly respect Attorney Murphy's legal guidance on this matter and don't disagree with it, I do think it's important to point out that he and he alone cannot make that decision for council, and I'm not implying that he was. I'm just, that's an act by a legislative body. So, you know, as you often have heard me say, I think it's, you know, if council is to act as one, as prescribed by, you know, our policies, and we do that through motions, I think it's imperative that the motion is clear and doesn't make assumptions. And so I would offer an amendment. So I would move to amend by inserting after City Council recognizes edits to city ordinances are normally handled with 3 reading process as required per Charter Section 2.09, but that due to an unintentional omission of 2 words, and that because this matter concerns compliance with federal government requirements on a deadline, the City Council, I would leave the rest of that sentence, which is hereby ordains the minor edits to add the word not and the word national to Chapter 106 Floodplain Management Ordinance as indicated in the documentation. I would strike attached and add presented to the City Council. And that you could pass to Madam Mayor, so she has it. I need to wait for a second.
Thank you. Okay, so there is a motion to amend by Councilor Johnston. Would you guys, want me to reread it for you? Be it ordered that the City Council, insert, recognizes edits to the city ordinances are normally handled with a 3-reading process as required per Charter Section 209, but that due to an unintentional omission of 2 words and that because this matter concerns compliance with federal government requirements on a deadline, the City Council hereby ordains the minor edits to add the word not and the word national to the Chapter 106 Floodplain Management Ordinance as indicated in the documentation presented to City Council.
I will second that.
Okay, second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Yeah, again, I think the motivation here is it just clarifies what we're doing. We're recognize it as part of the public record, which, again, for at least myself, it's important. It's imperative to what we do as we look back on the historical record here. Certainly, it's included in the packet, but I have concerns that, you know, future councils, future staff members, future city attorneys might look at it and go, oh, well, they did X before, when in reality, we're admitting, while it's minor, and I 100% agree it's minor, we are violating our own portion of the city charter that requires a 3-meeting process. So again, I'm just spelling out why we're doing it, the reasons, and again, we know that that's what we're voting on. I think
Thank you for the explanation. Okay, so we have a amended motion by Councilor Johnston, second by Councilor Hatch. Any other questions or comments? Okay, motion, roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to amend passes 5-0. Okay, back to the main motion. Any questions or concerns or comments regarding the change? We do have Director Prescott here if anybody had any questions. Okay, not seeing any. Roll call vote. Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, moving on to item B, that is the final reading of Chapter 176 Sewers, Ordinance Revision to Appendix A, Residential Uses for the WRRD Flow Schedule for the Impact Fees. That is Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. During discussion of Saco's LD 2003 ordinance amendments, the City Council increased the maximum allowable size of accessory dwelling units to 1,000 square feet. The purpose of this Chapter 176 appendix revision is to align with the LD 2003 ordinance revisions previously adopted in September 2023. Be it ordered that the City of Saco hereby ordains Chapter 176 Sewers Ordinance Revision to Appendix A as presented.
Motion has been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion or comments? Okay, not seeing any. Roll call vote. Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, that concludes the action items this evening. Now we move on to item 10, and that is new business. And we do have two items. Item A is a downtown gateway concept plan. Welcome back.
So thank you for having this on new business tonight. We thought we should bring forward a concept plan that staff has been working on. We did discuss it during the capital budget process as well, capital projects budget process. And we have shared it with the planning board, this plan that you see before you. And we did receive positive comments from them during the workshop that they had on it on March 19th. Sounds like they may want to review it again in the future, but they had very positive things to say so far. Pat will provide you an overview of the plan. This is multiple departments, so Tracy, she's not at the table with us, but she's been instrumental in this work, as has been Joe Laveria, our city engineer, and then our city administrator as well. So I'll let Pat kind of give an overview.
Thanks. Yeah, so this was briefly touched on in the grand scheme of the budget this year, but at the time that it was brought to you, it was still a very fluid situation with an abutting developer and their offsite requirements that were required by the planning board upon initial approval versus what sort of the city engineer, public works, planning and economic development have sort of reimagined for the gateway to our city. So probably for the last 10 years, there's been mention of it would be nice to have, when you come over from Biddeford, just enhance that whole hill up to the train station and into our Main Street downtown. So I think just in the nuts and bolts of working through the planning process, some of those opportunities were just sort of missed, and it wasn't the planning board's not going to lay out a project that's going to cost several $1 million. So I think our transportation master plan is going to address some of this in the future, but for now we're still trying to play catch up when development occurs. But I think we caught this one in time. So the area we're looking at is as you come across from Biddeford up past Run of the Mill, Saco Island East, the train station, and there's sort of a before and after. So on the screen right now you see everything to the right is the yet to be developed parcel or currently under development parcel. This is a sort of rudimentary look of what's going in on that, and we're already working with the developer to upgrade all of the traffic signals and make those actually active, the ones that have been blinking for over a decade. But we would like to actually slow traffic down and accommodate all modes of transportation like we look at everywhere a lot more now than we used to. So slowing people down coming down that hill before they get to a traffic signal involves creating some narrower lanes, putting in some landscaped islands. We'd like to repurpose the discussions of sort of between staff, planning board, the developer, is they had an offsite improvement condition of building a sidewalk on the east side of Main Street. That sidewalk doesn't really, there's not any other frontage besides a CMP electrical substation on that side, and it creates another long-term maintenance item for us in the form of a wall, a sidewalk, another railroad crossing for pedestrians, whereas a traffic signal could bring those people over to one side of so the concept that's laid out here does not show a sidewalk on the east side, and that's what has to go back. That's back before planning board as an amendment. Staff, I think, staff has weighed the pros and cons and understands if the sidewalk gets built or the planning board decides that, that's fine. We can still move forward with the rest of this concept. But we were trying to work towards something where the developer's funds get repurposed into this project, requiring less general fund and tax dollars later on. So kind of why it's before you, because even though you saw it during the budget process, there's been enough public comment on it that it seemed appropriate to bring it back to you in new business, see if there was any additional feedback. We still wanted to do something along that right side, but make it more of like a landscaped hillside. and just focus on getting all the pedestrians to one side and then enhance that side more through more lighting, better features from benches to sort of aesthetic sidewalk finishes and whatnot. So,
So right now, this is really an FYI of what's been out there, what's been to planning board workshop, and then we're just pending like a decision from the planning board, so we won't get into the details of the condition or the sidewalk or anything like that, but this is the overall plan that staff had laid out.
and I think while I don't think anyone here, staff or elected officials or administration, can say this will all get funded in next year's budget cycle or the budget cycle after, we certainly wanted to see if there was some collective buy-in that this is a good way to head over the next few years, or however it could be part of a future infrastructure bond. It could be phased into downtown TIF usage over the next few years. The project can certainly take a phased approach. It doesn't have to happen in one contractor mobilization.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Councilor Johnston?
I don't have all the answers. I recognize that. I'm not a traffic engineer. There's just so much traffic that travels this road, Elm Street, and while I think the effort is nice that we're trying to accommodate all modes of transportation, I just can't envision narrowing down that road. While it may serve some, I also witness, as we've also seen at traffic safety, but certainly I see it on the daily in front of my own residents, like road rage is a real thing. So the more you constrict that artery, there's going to be consequences elsewhere. So maybe you slow the traffic down, but that's not going to prevent those same individuals from driving recklessly. And again, it's not a criticism at all of the plan. I don't know what the answer is here. I think the idea of crossing people on this road as laid out, whether you have a blinking light or not, I wouldn't cross there.
This would only, the pedestrian crossing will take effect with a fully signalized intersection. So only when the light will be active, it'll be the same exact motion as pushing. You'll have a full pedestrian movement at a stopped red light. So just like you do in Pepperell Square or North Street.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that. We have those in several other locations in the downtown. As I've often said, and in fact, well, Ms. Archer saw me tonight, and she probably was watching as I jaywalked, because I do not cross at Thornton Avenue, because I have been hit once and near hit on my backside another time, because it's just too busy of an intersection to feel comfortable crossing the way we lay out crosswalks, since we're against mid-block and whatnot. Again, I'm not, it's not a criticism. I don't know what the answer is. I thought a sidewalk would, people already walk that. You can see the cow path that exists, because if you're on that side of the road, they don't want to cross, whether it's up here at the tracks, it's to continue down. I think people are still going to walk that path. Again, I even signalized, I don't know if I'd take that chance, because you now have a light here, you have a light at the end of the bridge right in Biddeford that I guess the DOT or whoever at the state thought that was some kind of solution in Biddeford, and from what I've witnessed, it doesn't seem much of a solution to me. Yeah, I don't know. That's really all I have to add. I don't see how this helps. I see the repercussions of it, where drivers just, until we change that, narrowing down this road, this isn't Water Street, this isn't a side street, this is a main artery. I'd like to think otherwise, but I just see it too often to believe this would work, but it is what it is, I guess.
Councilor Hewitt, I'm sorry, Councilor Gunn first, then Councilor Hewitt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could you both kind of expand a little bit on the plans for, I guess the best way to describe it is on the picture there, where the before and after, there's that, the bottom one where you have the white kind of straight square going down, and that gap between the road and all the way up to pretty much the access road to the power station. Then you have the access road to the development, and that gap underneath that kind of bows out there. Could you speak a little bit more about the particulars of how you envision sort of that section? Because if you really, I mean, obviously that's the key amount to this whole real estate, because obviously the development, whether you're buzzing through or even if you're walking through, you really can't see from that section. So that's really the key to this whole situation is, lack of a better term, beautification, or are you thinking about perhaps altering the grading of the hill or something like that? Because, I mean, obviously I know we can't really talk to a potential sidewalk because that's in the planning board, and I was there for that meeting. Pros and cons outside the development notwithstanding, even if there wasn't a sidewalk there, creating a situation where people could be on that side of the road in a safer environment, though obviously no weeds or things of that nature, or perhaps not a steep grade. Could you extrapolate a little bit on that? Because I'm trying to, because I see the potential there, but in terms of how it exists now, it seems like it's a bit of a jump in terms of how you actually get to where it's not just sort of drive-through country.
So, if I may, anecdotally, I will say that when you come down, when you're driving from Biddeford into Saco now, there's no real indication that you're to me, that you're entering a slower area. It kind of speeds up a little bit when you come out of the signals. And so one of the goals of this is to make it feel like when you're driving, you're entering a slower area where pedestrians may be, to try to help with driver behavior. So that was one of the reasons of making more narrow road widths in certain areas. And then, Pat, if you want to add to that.
I think, so I think you're talking about the rectangle that is labeled landscape area.
Yes, exactly.
I don't think there was a goal in our, this is very much a rudimentary concept plan that would still have to go through some future design, but we were picturing just a simple, rather than an overgrown slope that has to be mowed with pretty heavy equipment and doesn't get a finished mowing. We were picturing just a couple terraced planting beds of low maintenance shrubbery that doesn't need the consistent mowing or get as overgrown. I would certainly defer to Parks and Rec a little bit more on that. But we were not picturing trying to accommodate, if you get into trying to accommodate people walking through there, I mean, again, people can't cross the bridge on that. There's no pedestrian crossing into Biddeford on that side. So I think some of that wear path has been people that have casually used the unoccupied Saco Island East, which will now be several residential properties without a public component. So, so we're hoping with a formal intersection and a better road alignment, people will want to cross and use a paved sidewalk. It's hard for us to, within the city environment, accommodate walking on an area that's just a dirt path. So it's either really a full sidewalk or you're trying to prevent pedestrian movements there. So in the center, what we've done, all of the space you see within the paved area is really working within the existing roadway. We've gone down to 10.5 to 11-foot lanes on several streets with very little feedback on it, honestly. I think hopefully people subconsciously drive a little slower, but that they don't say, oh my goodness, these lanes are too narrow. So by doing that, we gained some width for shoulders that could be designated as bike lanes. And what we did with, if you look, most traffic stays to the right coming up the hill, and then you have these people that slingshot out to the left and use the entire length of the turn lane for Water Street to pass people, get ahead, and speed up. What we did was we turned that into individual turn pockets. So you can still move over to the left if you want to pull into, say, Saco Island Deli. You could still pull into, or Deli and Company, you could still pull in to the, you could get into a separate left turn pocket to turn into the train station, and then a separate left turn pocket for Water Street. So the idea is to still give people those pockets, but they wouldn't use the whole turn lane as a drag strip.
Follow-up question. In terms of islands to sort of help slow people down, at the same time, we are talking about traffic. Let's just assume that they were to go 10 miles an hour slower and it was better enforced, et cetera, et cetera. You have still many points of folks from Biddeford area coming into Saco they're going to make left-hand turn lanes. I think the most prominent would be into the train station as it is. In terms of your line of sight, the fact that there's a pretty steep grade to that hill makes any left-hand turns problematic. In terms of where would you think that you would have islands, and of course I'm thinking like, ones, really nice ones like we have down on Industrial Park though by the overpass where you get the trees and things like that. What point would they just be nice islands, or what point would you have trees? I mean, because obviously the line of sight is a serious concern regardless if they're going 15 miles an hour or 35.
The narrower ones that you see on this plan would probably just be a slightly raised separate surface, like a concrete or a stamped pavement or like a cobblestone look. We haven't gotten into any of the design elements, and then the larger ones that bubble out a little bit, there's really just two of those, could have some center low greenery. There was no intent to actually try to put trees just because there are too many sight distance elements to this corridor, I would agree.
Okay, because I was concerned when I heard that, though, because just, as I said, for particulars. And I guess one last question, if I may, Madam Mayor, is, again, we're not debating the issue of a sidewalk on the other side, because that's for the planning board, but let's just assume that there was no sidewalk on the east side. In order to keep people from walking on that side, because I have done it myself, honestly. If I was taking a hike I didn't want to cross for safety reasons. I've walked that cow path. A lot of garbage on it, by the way. Are you envisioning sort of almost like a sheer sort of like rock wall that goes right down to pretty much where the edge is to make it pretty much physically impossible to walk on that area? I mean, as a practical...
I wasn't personally in drafting this. We weren't looking to...
Well, spitball.
We weren't looking to change that side considerably. I mean, again, the concept of this versus if this were to get built with the sidewalk on both sides, that's fine. It just means that the developer's funds, efforts, and our future maintenance will be on both sides for a sidewalk that now has a wall with lighting on top of or in front of the wall and cutting into a hill. It's a lot of work to get a sidewalk on that side, and we just said, is there a way to better purpose those dollars into a different vision for the hill? So that's kind of what it was. But if the planning process follows through and there's a sidewalk on both sides, or if there's feedback from council that you want to accommodate people walking on both sides, then a sidewalk should be built on both sides. It's just staff felt that with limited funds and resources, perhaps we should be repurposing dollars to the road aesthetics, slowing people down as they come to a new traffic signal, and putting more money into lighting and the existing sidewalk reconstruction. So,
I was just thinking, because if you have shrubbery that close, and people want to walk on that side, they're gonna tramp over the shrubbery. So again, me spitballing, rather so it's not something that you really have to heavy duty, send the public works crew out though, whether it's mulch or crushed rock, something where people who occasionally want to use it as a cow path can use it without, basically ruining the overall look of it. That's just something I would throw out there as a possibility, because, if people get in the habit of doing something, they're going to do it, unless there is some really wholesale changes to this section, which, as we've discussed earlier, is a little problematic. But I look forward to seeing more details, because this is definitely something in the right direction, because it's a wasted space right now. I mean, honestly, it really should be a showpiece, and it's kind of, well, left side is, but God, don't turn your right, Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Hewitt?
One question, with the new development, is there a possibility that there may be a bus stop there? And is that a concern if we don't have a sidewalk, if kids are waiting for rides to school?
the developer's sidewalk will come out to Main Street the same way either way.
Okay.
And then it would sort of wrap around the corner. It's just a matter of whether it continues up the hill or not, but when it wraps around the corner, that's where it'll have all the ADA compliant crosswalks and signage and everything. So there'll be a pocket there. If there are kids there going to school, I imagine, like the school department usually does, they have to evaluate whether or not, I mean, A, are they serving that area, or is it too close to the elementary schools? Of course, once the schools move, it won't be. So they'd probably evaluate whether or not they just pull into the development for safety and loading purposes. But I would say the sidewalk will come out of their entrance to a spot that would be that place where kids would wait, whether we build it up the hill or not.
Okay, thank you.
And there was not a bus stop planned in the current proposal, like a transit bus stop.
Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. I'm just going to, and I had also, with Councilor Gunn, as liaison to the planning board, I listened to the planning board discussion. I thought it was very thorough, very well thought out. I think there are still some issues that are still churning in the heads of our very competent planning board members. I just want to clarify one point and then compliment you on this design. My recollection of having the sidewalk on both sides really creates this proverbial sidewalk to nowhere, right? We go up the hill, and then is it going to go all the way to the railroad tracks?
It was originally planned to go all the way to the railroad tracks. Full design of that sidewalk was not submitted, so there's still design work that would need to be done. And the city, if it is built, which again, we're neutral on, or I'm neutral on, if it is built, then we would have a retaining wall on that side.
Yeah. And then you could not take a left out of the development to go to Biddeford. You would have to cross the street because the sidewalk's on the other side of the street to get to the Biddeford.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess my point is that there are some complexities there with the sidewalk on both sides. And if there's a willingness ultimately of the developer to give us a fee in lieu of putting in that sidewalk, and we can, as you've discussed, reposture that money more effectively. I like the traffic calming. I like the bike lanes. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but I think you did a similar thing on North Street when you put in the bike lanes. You had this diagram of reducing the widths of the existing lanes, then a foot or so. So, and that I don't, anecdotally, personally, I think that's worked out pretty well. But I do think that, and this is all water over the dam, but when you talk about Gateway, we missed, I think, a significant development opportunity on Saco Island East to create what I would envision as a much more attractive gateway project. And I think the developers probably feel the same way. I'm not sure that this is what they wanted to begin with. So that's all behind us. It's going to be a very attractive subdivision. I'm envisioning the homes are going to be fairly expensive. But I think we should at least think about the visual of entering our city. And I remember as a young kid marching in the parade as a Cub Scout, walking down that hill, and it was the worst part of the parade because all you could inhale was the fumes, the toxic fumes from Saco Tannery. Okay, that was not a gateway. That was pretty disgusting. So I think an effort to do something like this brings that whole area full circle. And so, I would personally be thinking favorably of some kind of concept like this that slows down the traffic, gets us some bike lanes, because that's really what we're trying to do as a city vision, is to make our city more multimodal friendly, and I think this really helps. I don't want to discount the concerns that have been expressed because I think there are some arguments, but I'm looking at this quite favorably personally.
Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would agree to Councilor Hatch's point that, any improvement's better than nothing, but I will just add that when we speak of, sidewalks to nowhere, that still may be in play because one of the key components of this, and I speak for myself, but having sat on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, it has been for some time amongst those members and Director Summers to beautify the upper lot that the city owns right next to the dam, right? Right now, I believe it's still being used for construction. And so the thought with that particular project on Saco Island East was that the sidewalk would get you up to the train tracks and continue on to Main Street, so you could get people from Main Street to this area, you know, that at some point would be kind of a mini park. So whatever we do, we may still be looking at putting a sidewalk, at least a continuation from Main Street, which currently is a sidewalk to nowhere, right? It ends right at the railroad tracks. You know, it's just, it's nothing different than any other, you know, New England town where we're trying to plan after much of our community has been built out. So like I said, it is what it is. I hope it would slow traffic. I certainly would monitor it. I do walk that hill, and people scream through there, but it seems like they drive like that everywhere. And really, again, until we change that behavior, I don't know what we're really doing, but that's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, that now takes us to item B of the new business, and that's a charter amendment, section 2.01, composition of municipal offices and compensation. And I will hand this over to Councillor Hatch as he has presented in a charter amendment.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. This proposal is the result of conversations I've had with some fellow councilors informally, my own personal observations, and I think that it's important that we think about the work that's involved in sitting on this dais or acting as mayor or school board engagement, and how much time and effort that takes. And the fact that, you know, our current compensation level has probably been stuck at that number. I don't know for certain, but it looks like the last amendment to this was many years ago, 2014, was it, or something to that effect. So I have thought about this a lot. I think that it's time for the voters, the citizens of Saco, to take an opportunity to look at the compensation levels for mayor, council, and school board, and determine whether or not they agree that it's time for an adjustment. I've made some recommendations there. Those recommendations were not pulled out of the thin air. Included in the packet tonight is work done, initiated by City Administrator Bahenko and staff to give us some comparative data to other communities. I'm proud of my city. I'm not sure we should be a follower. I think we maybe want to be a leader and set a tone for public service that includes, you know, a reasonable level of compensation for the time involved. And that's how I came up with those recommendations. Other than that, I think that if we are successful in setting a new benchmark for compensation through voter validation in November, that we shouldn't have to revisit this every year. So putting in the COLA adjustment recommendation was my effort to get it done, if approved, and continue to offer a change in that compensation rate that's consistent with our non-union staff. I also think it's important, it's in my proposal, but for the record, I think it's important that if we go in this direction, that we make it clear that none of us sitting at this dais if we promote this, are going to benefit from this until we go through another election cycle. So, and I know that the terms are staggered, so some of us will get there faster than others, which is fine with me. And we eventually will be sort of on the same plane as time goes by. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, my thoughts on this, and I certainly would welcome my fellow colleagues to weigh in on this issue. I don't want anybody to think that we're all sitting up here engaging in public service for the money, because that's not the issue. But I do think that for the time that we spend, and I actually spent a little time on this myself today, just kind of reflecting on this from my own personal engagement. I take my, like everybody that sits on the council, and I can say this confidently, we all take our jobs seriously. There's lots of time spent. You see us here at council meetings. I know that I spend the better part of my Mondays, 2 or 3 hours, trying to get ready for the evening meeting, which can run, another 3 hours or so. We all are liaisons to various commissions and boards. Some of them take more time than others. I happen to sit on the BSUB Transit Board, which meets twice, 2 different committees every month, once a month. I serve as liaison to the Planning Board, which meets at least two nights a month. I'm not complaining, because I'm happy to be sitting in those roles, but I did a quick tally of the number of hours that I feel like I spend on my role here, and it's pretty extensive. It's, I got it up to about 250 to 260 hours a year, and when you do the math on the compensation levels that we have today, I figured out it was $4.50 an hour, and if we go with the proposed compensation levels, it gets it up to approximately what I could earn at McDonald's for starting compensation. So I'm not trying to be too greedy here, but I do think that the recognition of the work that goes into this, and potentially appealing to other folks in the community who may want to step forward, and I hope they do, and create an environment where we have even more community engagement. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Okay, any comments or discussions? Let's, Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is always a difficult topic, right? We're sitting here talking about giving ourselves a pay raise, I guess, is one way to look at it. And I think I've said previously, I've wrestled with this myself for several years, really going back to city administrators now, where I took the time, and I guess it was 2019, to kind of put together what you have, Phil, with surrounding communities, so I could, deliver, this is where Saco is in comparison. And as I discovered, and I think for the most part you have too, it's really kind of a symptom of a disease across the entire state, where municipal officials are certainly underpaid compared to what they put into it. And I've always been one that have been very concerned about making this position, a paid position, a full-time job, because people seek it, as you see down in our sister state down south in Massachusetts. When you go down to the compensation of their city councilors or mayors, it's like, well, no wonder they're running for office. They're looking for the pay and the benefits of it, which again, I think defeats the purpose of civil service, at least elected. But at the same time, I certainly know how much I put into this, right? And I last election cycle really wrestled with myself internally, saying, my children are aging. I'm now missing out on sporting events, things like that. And is it really worth my time to particularly having been a child of a mayor, where more often than not, and this isn't a criticism of my father, but more often than not, he was not at those events. And So, I mean, this was something I had actually considered bringing forth at budget time. I think it's, certainly worth the discussion. And at the end of the day, let the voters decide, are we worth it? And hey, maybe that helps make people's minds up for them. Yeah, I mean, I think that if my compensation of $1,200 pre-tax is the same as it was 11 years ago, which was the same as it was 10 to 15 years prior, because I believe the last time council had a pay increase was in 1999.
Well, I was wondering, because I had heard previously before.
Actually, it might be 97, because I remember when my father stepped down from that first series of terms as mayor in 97, it was soon after that, and at that time, the mayor was paid $1,200 and council was paid $300, and then it got bumped up when Mayor Johnson came in. So it was in that period of 97 to 99 that, an increase went. And obviously, I think what you've presented is reasonable. I mean, certainly, it is what you make of it, like anything, right? You could have a city councilor that does nothing or a mayor that attends nothing and still get that same compensation. But that comes down to the individual and their comfortability with doing such things. But certainly, I think of, what Madam Mayor or even prior mayors put in and think that, well, they're only getting, $3,600. Is that really fair? You get what you pay for, I guess, in many ways. And I mean, we're 70 million plus budget. So I guess the public, you're tasking us with $70 million to spend, I guess, appropriately, and yet you're rewarding us with our efforts. I think it's $970 some odd after tax. So, I mean, I'm supportive of it. I would just add, while I think it's extremely noble how you've presented it, that we kind of phase this in. Where I stand, it's either one or the other. Let the voters decide, and if they say no, then it is what it is, or they approve it, and then we're all on the same playing field. I don't know what that does for, payroll people or whatnot. Just make it consistent and not to be, make it personal, but is it necessarily fair that with myself or the mayor, and I've been here 11 years now, I'm going to be stuck at a prior compensation with 2 more years on my term, whereas new councilors come right in and are increased. It just, like I said, I think it's noble and good effort to kind of say, hey, we're not giving ourselves a pay raise, but essentially the fact that voters have to approve the pay raise, that is the checks and balances. Unlike county, I will point out, because county government is paid far greater than all of us, and they literally set their own pay every year during the budget. And I believe they get health insurance, which, probably would be more beneficial than the actual pay, at least from my perspective. But yeah, I think that, it's certainly time to have the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Gunn?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can appreciate why Councilor Hatch put in a staggered sort of schedule for the pay increases, though, because to Councilor Johnson's point, we don't want the optics, like our friends down at and Alfred have, of giving ourselves a pay raise. At the same time, I can see the inherent unfairness of, having to wait until your pay is bumped up, though. So I could go either way on that one, because at the end of the day, we have to make a concerted argument to the public, and the argument is our time and effort worth it, really? And all things being fair, we're all here because we're civically minded and we want to serve our public. At the same time, I don't think any reasonable person expects us to take a financial hit by giving our time and effort to the city. Because whether or not, again, whether you go to more public events, whether you go to all the, committees, what you want to do, whether if you're like me and you like to sit at home and try to craft a law, though, and you find joy in that, or the fact that we're all, I consider us all on the clock 24/7, because any of us can get a call from any constituent 24/7, and we got to direct them to somebody to make sure that, things are right. So for that level, I think that's a fair enough argument to make to the public. And I'd have no, I'm going to, full disclosure, I'll be campaigning in a month for re-election, and I would own this issue for the simple reason that the amount of effort, mental effort, that it takes to be good at this job. Anyone can do the job a couple months in, but to be really good at it, you need time, you need to be reflective, you need to build relationships, a lot of soft power things that aren't in the MMA manual, that you don't pick up from just, talking to people on the street. It really is a lot extra, and to have be well compensated for that, it does give an incentive to also to people that I certainly, one of my goals as a counselor has been trying to motivate new people to get involved. And it's bad enough that you have to get them over the hump that politics, that's for somebody else, that's not for me, and they don't realize that politics is how we interact as human beings, and it's not a dirty word. It's literally how we formulate the best policy to give people the best shot at life. And if you have to talk, that's a hard enough sell as it is, though, but to then sell them on the idea that, yeah, you're not going to financially hurt when you give your time and effort to do this, I think that's more than reasonable. We're seeing, it's not across the board, but we're seeing in the workplace, whether it's inflation, whether it's post-COVID, a lot of companies that are starting to get a little religion and realize that, maybe we should pay people a living wage, though. And I think when it comes to what we're doing, with the power and responsibility that we have, it is, it's still a pittance by comparison, but I think it's more than fair. And the fact that it's tied to COLA, the fact so we won't have to have this debate every year because it is a political hot potato, we take that out there and we just make it just tied to COLA. I think that's the punchline to the whole thing. And I think that was well crafted by Councilor Hatch, and I'd be more than happy to support this. And looking at it over the last couple of days, the numbers I think are solid, and I support them as they are. So I'd be more than willing to put that out to the public and speak in favor of it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, just to add a point to note here, though, in looking at the charter, section 4.01 under the school board, it does state that their compensation is the same and payout as council. So if we choose to leave that as it is, then whatever we puts forth under the referendum would fall on school board as well. Or we can relook at their compensation and adjust it accordingly based on their time and the duties that they perform.
Yeah.
So it can either be done one or it can be two separate.
As Councilor Hatch has laid out here, he's kind of stricken that verbiage from the charter and suggested an annual salary of $2,500 for school board, and I think that's just kind of a suggestion on your part, Councilor Hatch. Myself personally, and I fully admit that my mother is a school board member, but if we're going to do it, they should just compensate them equally, because there's equal amounts of time and commitment, put in through their body, not just the meetings, but all the subcommittees they have. Like I said, I know firsthand, because parts of entire weeks at times, like last week, a good portion of my mother's time, and by virtue of that, I've got my other parent, my father, working by himself while she's off, as he says, playing school board.
Okay, so just making sure that everybody realizes that it's two-sided on here. Okay, so this will be brought forth at an upcoming meeting. We do have a timeline that was presented by City Clerk Hughes to get it on the ballot if it is approved by council to move forward. But I think the date that we were planning to bring forward was,
August 5th would be the first reading.
is that the day you're? Okay, yeah, so hopefully we will have this on the agenda for August 5th. Okay, that now takes us to item 11, and that is administrative updates. City Administrator Bahenko?
Thank you, Your Honor. First item, just a note that the city fire department received a $119,000 grant for developing and delivering an EMS field training officer. That's moving forward right now. Also, nomination papers will be available starting Monday, July 29th, 2024. The city clerk's office for Saco residents who wish to seek political office in the November 5th, 2024 election. Right now, the city councilor wards 1, 3, 6 for 3-year term, school board 1, 3, 5, and 7, 3-year term. And a candidate for nomination to the elective office of councilor or school board shall become qualified by filing a nomination signed by 35 registered voters from the respective ward. Nominations must be returned to the city clerk's office no later than 1 p.m. on Friday, September 6, 2024. Moving on, there's an RFP for a 2024 Ford 150 single cab. The city of Saco will be soliciting bids for that new 2024 Ford 150 for the Public Works Department. Bids will be accepted until 1 p.m. on Friday, August 9th at the Saco Public Works Department, 15 Phillips Spring Road, Saco, Maine. RFP 2024 Ford 150 Super Cab. The city of Saco is soliciting bids for one new 2024 Ford 150 for Public Works. Bids will be accepted until 1 p.m. on Friday, August 9th at the Saco Public Works Department. RFP 2 2024 all-wheel drive SUVs. The city of Saco is soliciting bids for 2 new 2024 all-wheel drive SUVs for the codes and assessing departments. Bids will be accepted until 1 p.m. on Friday, August 9th at the Saco Public Works Department, 15 Phillips Spring Road. Please visit the sacomaine.org for additional information. Also, just a reminder of Harbor Fest, which the mayor brought up earlier. Again, that would be kickoff with fireworks on August 3rd, 2024, and the Camp Ellis Harbor Fest on August 4th, 2024. I also wanted to mention again that Fire Chief John DeRose will be retiring after 44 years on the job, and so we will be internally posting the position of Fire Chief.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Okay.
Any questions or comments for the city administrator? Okay, that now takes us to item 12, and that's council discussion and comment. Any councilors wishing to speak? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Gosh, I think I had weeks worth of things, but I've, like I normally do, lost track of notes. But I will say, as an update to council after, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, I made reference to some regulations when it comes to parks, open space. At the time, I had indicated that I was interested in potentially like an emergency ordinance. I've had several councilors ask me about that since then, and I have, after communicating with both the mayor and city manager, city administrator, that have decided instead of an emergency ordinance to just work a regular ordinance process, partly because after thinking about it, I was having a hard time wrapping my head around the notion of the emergency when, in fact, there was, at least by my own assessment, not a current emergency. You could say there potentially could be one, but there wasn't. And I think in the past, maybe perhaps we've, I wouldn't say misused them, but I wanted to steer away from that and allow the regular process to work itself out. So since then, I've begun my own work on an ordinance. City staff has actually started, and I believe we'll discuss what staff has put together to date at the advisory board meeting this week, and just keeping everybody informed that this will move forward in a regular process, which really is the better process, so we get all stakeholders involved. So that was that. Gosh. What time is it? I don't remember what else I was going to say. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Oh, well, I do, not that Chief DeRoss has retired yet, but officially, but I do want to take the time just to, thank him for the 40-plus years of service and recognize that his retirement, though he probably isn't going far, is a pretty significant loss to the city of Saco, and it's certainly much deserved, but we'll have a hard time replacing all that knowledge and just who he is as a person. So just, congratulations there. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, moving on to item 13, that is executive session. Is there a motion to enter into executive session? Counselor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. Be it ordered that the City Council enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 405(6)A, Personnel Matter.
Motion has been made by Counselor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Parks. Roll call vote to enter into executive session. Counselor Parks?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 at 9:03. We will be downstairs in the conference room? Yes. Downstairs in the conference room. Okay, good evening and welcome back, everybody. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
Motion made by Counselor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Hewitt. Roll call vote. Counselor Parks?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt, Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to exit executive session at 9:33 passes 5-0. Is there a report?
No report.
Okay, that takes us to item 15, and that is adjournment this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Counselor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Johnston. Roll call vote. Counselor Parks?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn passes 5-0 at 9:33. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.